Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. Today, we're going to conduct a literary study on Daily Report About My Witch Senpai. So, the purpose of this video is to treat this manga the same way you would treat a literary classic in a high school or college English class. So basically, that means we're going to take a look at the plot of each chapter, do a little character analysis, and then study things like character psychology and theme. If this sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing. I've been working on several series in this format, so there's a lot of content you won't want to miss. Lately, we've been working on a series on Rent-A-Girlfriend and the Quintessential Quintuplets, but I also have a complete series on Aria of the Beach Forest, which is another manga about witches, so if this type of manga interests you, I highly recommend checking out that one. So, as always, I want to give a brief spoiler warning for the content in today's video. Today we'll be discussing Volume 1 of Daily Report About My Witch Senpai, so we won't be discussing other volumes though, so no worries about future spoilers. And with that being said, we can jump right into our discussion. I want to start with sort of a disclaimer about the setting. So, in terms of world building, in this world, witches and wizards do exist, but they're rare. They're somewhat normalized in that people know they exist, but that being said, people still seem to be mostly suspicious of magic users. We don't know yet too much about how witches learn magic, if it's genetic, things like that, but it doesn't seem to be something you can become. It seems more like it's something you're born with. So, this manga is divided into several encounters, which I think sort of fits into the whole daily report, which is, the title of the manga. So, Encounter 1 introduces us to Misono, and I apologize if I mispronounce any names, but I'm going to do my best. So, Misono leaves work late on a snowy night. He sees his senpai, Shizuka, flying by on a magical broom. It turns out that Shizuka is a witch. We learn that she's also working late and that she's characterized as being a bit of a pushover in the office. Before she flies off, however, she gets close to Misono and uses magic to warm up his drink. This moment causes his heart to race, and he sort of wonders why. And as a quick annotation, even though they know each other before this moment, since it's the first moment we see them interact, it would still be classified as a meet cute in like a romance novel. And that brings us to Encounter 2. So here Misono is on a train heading to an important client. He's forgotten important paperwork, however, and isn't sure what to do since he doesn't have enough time to return to the office, get the paperwork, and then get to his meeting on time. He looks out the window and sees Shizuka flying super fast on her broom. She's carrying his missing documents and hands them off to him at the next stop. This further develops the characterization on Shizuka because we learn that she is 1, caring and attentive, and 2, also takes her job very seriously. We also learn in the process of this that forgetting documents is very out of character for Misono. So, Encounter 3 begins with Shizuka moving office furniture with her magic. She has a flashback to getting yelled at by her boss for making a mistake with her work. We learn that she can't move heavy objects really well with her magic, so she's struggling with it. We also learn that, unfortunately, Shizuka has very low self-esteem. Misono overhears her struggling with the furniture and comes in to help. He expresses gratitude for all of the time she's helped him and tells her that she should ask for help more often when she's struggling with something like this. Then we come to Encounter 4. So Encounter 4 starts with Shizuka and Misono sitting in a darkened, powerless office. Misono is here because he needs to edit a presentation. Shizuka, however, is here because she's helping someone else with their work. Misono gets upset at this and tells Shizuka that people are taking advantage of her. In response, Shizuka tells Misono that, in the past, everyone felt that it was unfair that she could use magic, so she's trying to make up for that. Shizuka uses her magic to restore power to the building, and this moment is so awe-inspiring that Misono forgets why he was even upset in the first place. Encounter 5 introduces us to a new character named Tsubasa. He asks Misono where Shizuka is. Shizuka then stops by and hands Tsubasa some of his belongings. Misono thinks that this must mean that they are boyfriend-girlfriend. However, through overhearing their conversation, he realizes that Tsubasa is actually Shizuka's younger brother. He's relieved by hearing this, though he isn't fully sure why. Tsubasa catches on, however, and teases Misono for having a crush on his sister. Flustered and embarrassed, Misono says that that's ridiculous. In a romance novel, this is often characterized as being the no way story beat. So the characters have them meet cute, they come together and have that first interaction, and then they usually say, no way, I could never date them. They're, richer than me, poorer than me, a member of a family I'm feuding with, they're the enemy, that kind of thing. And so this is similarly a moment where they're both saying, no way. Which then brings us to encounters 6 through 8. So, picking up the pace a bit, Misono feels bad about what he said and tries to apologize to Shizuka. Shizuka mistakes his regret for work-related stress and gives him a ride on her broom since the fresh night air usually helps center her. Emboldened by this, Misono asks her out on a date, but she mistakes this as a work-related luncheon. So, the next day, Misono, Shizuka, and Tsubasa all meet for lunch. Misono and Tsubasa bicker over Misono's interest in Shizuka. Despite this, the lunch goes well. Misono asks to ride on Shizuka's broom again, to which she asks if he would be embarrassed to be seen with her. He tells her no. And after an exhausting day at work, Misono invites Shizuka to take the train with him, and he carries her broom for her on the train. So then we have encounters 9 through 11. The next day, Shizuka sleeps in by accident and runs late for work. While she runs around getting ready, we are introduced to her pet/friend iguana. We also learn that Shizuka likes stand-up comedy. That night, Shizuka and her iguana friend share a meal. We learn that she met the iguana when she was a kid, so witches usually talk to cats, but Shizuka is different, and her iguana friend says that things have been boring since Shizuka broke up with her boyfriend a year ago. Shizuka, however, claims to be content being single. Misono stops by Shizuka's house to give her some important work documents. She invites him in for dinner and they share a nice, but a little awkward meal. Misono asks about Shizuka's dating life and she gets emotional explaining her previous relationship. Misono apologizes for making her talk about it and leaves, and later that night Shizuka gets a text from her ex-boyfriend. Which brings us to encounters 12 through 14. So, we are introduced to Shizuka's ex, Hiwatari. He was transferred to the Osaka branch, and the two broke up around that time, but now he's back in Tokyo. He's popular with their co-workers, but he misses Shizuka. Part of why he misses her, however, is because she didn't really argue and was sort of a pushover. The two go to a restaurant. Shizuka expresses gratitude for Hiwatari encouraging her to use her magic around others. However, he's still very pushy and sort of pushes her back into a relationship, and to also give him a ride on her broom. Hiwatari invites Shizuka to a get-together at a bar. Shizuka can't make it since she's busy with work, but Hiwatari expresses disappointment that she can't give him a ride home on her broom. Which brings us to encounters 14 and 15. Misono sees Shizuka working hard at work, but tells her, not to work too hard since she's not a robot and she needs rest too. Since they both missed the last train, Shizuka offers Misono a ride home on her broom. Up in the skies, she thanks him for what he said back in the office. Hiwatari, however, sees the two flying through the sky. The next day, Misono gives Shizuka some cookies as a thank you for the ride. Shizuka is cutely happy about the gift and then bumps into Hiwatari. He questions her about the other night and smashes the jar of cookies. He tells her that she's his girlfriend, so she shouldn't accept gifts like that from other guys. Misono, meanwhile, steps out of the office and sees this. Hiwatari introduces himself to Misono as Shizuka's boyfriend. So then we get encounter 16 and 17. Shizuka tries to fix the jar of cookies with her magic, but Hiwatari grabs her hand and stops her. We get a flashback to how life was for Shizuka when she first moved to Tokyo, and she struggled a lot. And we also see how Hiwatari and Shizuka met. Shizuka accidentally spilled tea on him when she was working as a waitress, but he laughed it off. She used her magic to clean him up, and he was amazed to find out that she was a witch. Shizuka was used to people getting suspicious of her magic, but Hiwatari told her to be confident in her abilities and encouraged her to show it off to others. When the two started dating, Shizuka was so happy. She wasn't alone anymore, and she began to be accepted by those around her, kind of through Hiwatari's intervention. However, with time, Hiwatari began to become demanding and controlling of Shizuka's magic, as well as being a little resentful of her abilities. And that brings us to encounters 17 and 18. So, before being ushered into a cab, Shizuka apologizes to Misono. Misono, however, says that it's fine and that he doesn't get hurt so easily. Later, Shizuka talks with her iguana friend about the situation. Her iguana friend tells her that she always tries so hard to please everyone that she ends up neglecting herself. But he also observes that this self-neglection is sort of subconsciously intentional out of a lack of self-esteem. When Hiwatari calls that night, Shizuka initially sprints to pick it up so he doesn't get mad. However, remembering Misono's encouragement, she stands up for herself and lets the call go to voicemail. Her iguana friend praises her for being so strong, and they both watch a comedy to sort of celebrate and distract themselves. Now, encounter 19. Later, at a work party, Hiwatari apologizes for breaking the jar, but also chastises Shizuka for not answering his calls. In a sort of drunken mania, their coworkers push them together and jump to the conclusion that they are going to get married. Shizuka, however, stands up for herself and calls out Hiwatari for his cruel behavior. Shizuka says that she'll never marry someone like that and runs out of the party. Once she's left, their coworkers whisper rumors about Hiwatari. Apparently, he has a reputation for causing issues at work. Shizuka, meanwhile, has a little freakout outside. She's both proud that she said what she said, but also afraid of confrontation. Misono, however, arrives just in time to comfort her. Encounter 20. Hiwatari asks Shizuka for a moment alone. Misono tries to protect her, but Shizuka says that she needs to confront this head-on. Hiwatari and Shizuka fly off on their broom and talk alone. He apologizes and tries to explain that he really does like Shizuka. It turns out he had been struggling with work a lot too. He was replacing a wizard at the Tokyo branch, and everyone was comparing him to the wizard. As a result, he felt inferior, but he appreciated how Shizuka encouraged him. Hiwatari tries to kiss her, but then she pulls back and apologizes. She tells him that this is goodbye. Encounter 21. Encounter 21 begins with a changed Shizuka. She's doing well at work, but is also much more assertive about saying no to manipulative coworkers. Meanwhile, Misono overhears some coworkers talking about how Shizuka said she doesn't want to date anyone right now and wants to focus on work. This disappoints him since he wanted to confess his feelings to her once things had settled down. Shizuka approaches Misono and thanks him for encouraging her. Misono realizes that he can wait to confess his feelings, since he's just happy to see her happy. Encounters 22 and 23. Encounter 22 takes place 2 months after the breakup. Shizuka had 10 days off of work and buys souvenirs for her coworkers. While doing so, however, she keeps getting distracted as she thinks about Misono. Once she returns to work, she overhears coworkers inviting Misono to a meetup. Apparently, there's a girl who's interested in him. This bothers Shizuka, though she isn't fully aware as to why. As she continues to overhear coworkers talk about Misono, her heart begins to hurt. When Misono returns to work and finds Shizuka there, Shizuka starts to realize that she might have feelings for Misono. Later, Shizuka starts being awkward and flustered around Misono. During their free time, she reads romance novels in order to better understand her feelings. Encounter 23 and 24. So, Shizuka grows increasingly awkward around Misono, but one day she notices him drop some paper. She retrieves it for him and discovers that they are movie tickets. At first, she thinks that this is for a date he's going on. Misono, however, explains that he got them from a client. He asks if she wants them, and she's grateful for the offer and asks if he would like to go see the movie with her. And it's a comedy movie, and we know she loves comedy movies. So they go on a movie date, and it's really sweet. However, both characters are still unsure as to if this is really a date or not. They end up sharing a couples parfait, they shop for iguana plushies, and they look at a light show. Before the light show begins, Shizuka apologizes for taking up space and not watching the light show from the sky. Misono, however, tells her that he's here with her, so she shouldn't worry about it. As the light show begins, the two kiss, and that concludes this first volume. So, let's take some time to discuss themes. I think one of the big themes is sort of privilege, the idea of privilege, and getting taken advantage of. So, one of the major themes surrounding Shizuka is the idea of privilege and the consequence of her being taken advantage of. Shizuka is different from others because she is a witch. However, many people take this to mean that she's privileged since she has magic and they don't. What they don't understand, however, is that there are limits to her magic and also consequences that come with using it. It's extremely taxing on her. So, since Shizuka has low self-esteem, however, she feels the need to do extra work for others to make up for her privilege, which often results in her being taken advantage of. And this theme is sort of connected to it, but it's the importance of standing up for yourself. So this ties into the ideas of the previous one. The solution to the problem of being taken advantage of is standing up for yourself. However, this is often much easier said than done, and this manga does a good job of showing how difficult this can be. Whether you need to stand up to a coworker, a boss, a stranger on the street, or a romantic partner, it can be a real challenge. This is because social etiquette often tells us that this act of saying no is rude or aggressive, so it often feels wrong to say no. However, I think that learning to say no is one of the most important areas for development and growth. So, some other thoughts on the manga. I really enjoyed this volume. The artwork is super cute and charming, and in general, it's just really well drawn. In a way, Misono kind of reminds me of Lloyd from Spy Family, while Shizuka reminds me of Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service and Arya from Arya of the Beach Forest. I like that Shizuka is often drawn with sort of exaggerated comedic facial expressions, since it's super endearing. I also felt like they handled the character of Hiwatari really well. I was worried that he would either be one, too cartoonishly evil, or two, an annoying antagonist who sticks around for too long. However, he ultimately is a strong portrayal of how good, conflicted people can still be toxic in relationships. Don't get me wrong, he's a jerk, but I still felt a little bad for him in the end after he apologized, and I think that's because ultimately he feels very human. Flawed, for sure, but human. I'm also really curious about where the plot will go from here. I was not expecting a kiss by the end of this volume, since usually that's where the story kind of ends with these sort of romance mangas. So I'm a little anxious that they'll need to separate the characters or have them fight in order for there to be plot, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm not actually opposed to the characters fighting. That happens in so many romance novels and stuff, but it's always sort of a bummer when they have such a cute, start. Because like in something like Pride and Prejudice, the whole time the characters are bickering, so it's fine when they fight since they have that fire to them. But these two characters both seem pretty sweet and quiet, so I hope we don't see them have some sort of big misunderstanding fight, but I also understand how that can be necessary for conflict, and conflict is what drives plot forward. So with that being said, I'm going to pretty much wrap this one up. If you enjoyed this analysis video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps grow the channel, and it also helps grow sort of the conversation in the comments. I always like discussing these mangas with everyone, so it's sort of a the more the merrier type situation. So what do you think of this manga? Did I miss something, or does the iguana not have a name? And also, I'm not sure about the iguana's gender, but also, what are your thoughts on Hiwatari? Do you think he's redeemable? Do you think he's just a jerk through and through? Or do you see that there might be some good in him? I can see him coming back later in the story, sort of potentially as a redeemed character, but we'll just have to wait and see. But with that being said, I'm going to wrap this one up. So take care, and I will see you in the next one.